Welcome to Doc Talk, a weekly podcast featuring Monument Health physicians addressing medical topics. Tune into your health with Monument Health.
Hello again and welcome to another episode of Doc Talk with Monument Health. My name is Mark Houston and joining me today is a doctor that I have heard so much about, and I didn't know if you were ever going to arrive and show up to do this.
I wasn't. My wife made me come. Stephanie trapped me. I avoided her for years.
She, one of the people that work with us on this podcast, Stephanie has said, "Look, I'm going to get this guy to come in at some point, someday. I don't know when it will happen. It's going to be as big a surprise to you as it is to anybody else. And here you are." Dr. David Kovaleski, doctor with Monument Health, and you're an ICU physician, correct?
Correct.
Is that the full title for you there, I suppose?
Critical care, yeah.
Right.
What do you mean title? I mean, I'm a doctor in the ICU.
Are you from here?
I was born, I tell people I was born in Casper and lived in Midwest, and people go, well, Midwest, that's like a suburb of Edgerton, I used to say, but really it's not a suburb anymore because Edgerton's actually nothing there in Midwest Wyoming. And then we moved to Recluse, Wyoming, which those are probably a lateral move, not an upward move. But
there's a Recluse, Wyoming?
Yeah. Yep. It's a small,
makes sense,
out in the middle of nowhere. Little. My dad worked in the oil fields, and then when I was in fifth grade, we moved into Gillette, and I grew up so I finished school and graduated from Campbell County High School in 1983.
Local. Yeah, I mean, if you're from Gillette.
We used to come over here a lot to ski at Deer Mountain and Terry Peak. And
okay.
Yeah.
So then your path got you started the military, wasn't it? Is that how this kind of all began for you? Or like right out of high school, what did you decide you were going to be?
Well, I'm 59, and I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. Drives my wife insane of almost 40 years. So no, right out of high school, I went to a Bible college in Dallas, Texas, called Christ for the Nations, and went there. Then moved back to Gillette after a year and a half, and was there, and I was just hanging out. And my dad, who was a B-17 ball turret gunner in World War II.
Oh, wow.
He said, man, you got to do something. You can't just – I was working at a local gym and where I met my wife, by the way. And I said, fine, I'll go in the Air Force. Because he was in the Air Force. There was no Army. What's that?
I'm sorry. I suppose when your dad says, look, I was a gunner in World War II, you're going to do something, son.
Yeah.
All right? That kind of – that kicks in a little bit.
I can't just hang out at how, you got to do something with your life. So, fine,
so you went to the Air Force. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Were you stationed here at Ellsworth?
I was at Ellsworth. I was an airplane mechanic on a 135R model tanker. That's when Ellsworth. We lived in Rapid from 85 to 95. We got married in 85, my wife and I. And, this was our first station, our only station. And I was here. I flew all over the world on a tanker, and I was a mechanic. Just fixed airplane.
That must have been exciting.
Oh, I got to see places that I will never. I've gone almost every continent except one, and got to go to Berlin before the wall came down. I mean, all kinds of things.
That history.
Place that I couldn't. I'll never get to probably again.
Have you ever revisited any of these places since you've been?
Not really. I mean, I don't. My wife, like I said, my daughter. My youngest is a PhD student in Aberdeen, Scotland, and she goes over there a lot, and they travel. I'm not at all afraid of flying.
Right.
I just hate it. I hate the process. I hate
you're not
going
alone.
through the line. I hate, your flight's been canceled. Yep. There's another one on Thursday in a week. I don't. So I do a lot I have a Toyota Sequoia that I sleep in and go to the Northern Territories in Canada and all kinds of stuff in that. I'd rather, growing up in Wyoming, I'd go to the Tetons a lot, and so. Well,
and those are such great trips to take in a vehicle because of the scenery. Yeah. It's beautiful when you're driving around doing that stuff. So in the Air Force, where did the career in medicine start then from there?
It's a good question.
I think I kind of know part of this story just a little, but I want you to tell it because this is fascinating.
I never ever. Growing up, never in my life ever. I don't have any family members who were in medicine, and even nursing or anything. Like I said, my dad worked in the oil field. My mom was a waitress. Grew up I tell people if you drive by I-90 and you look over on the right, I grew up in that trailer court right off I-90 in Gillette. I used to throw rocks at cars onto the interstate growing up. Loved baseball, played baseball. So I don't know. I got out of the Air Force and my wife's a teacher. And I thought, well, I want to have the same hours as my wife and kids. And I say I don't care about money, but I really don't. I mean, it drives me crazy wasting time, but I figure you can always make more money and get more food, but I hate wasting time. But so I went to School of Mines because we lived here, and she had a good job. She worked out at the Douglas school system, and I was a chemistry, math person, and then I think it was my second year, and he's still one of my best friends to this date. Chris Convalin asked me, hey, you want to take the MCATs with me? And I'm like, I have no idea what those are.
What is it? What is the MCAT?
Medical College Admission Test. So it's like you take like SATs, ACT for medical school.
So your friend just comes up and says, hey,
we're sitting in class one day, and
you want to do this?
I said, no. He said, so I'll pay for it. And I said, sure. So I took it, and anyway, applied and got in. So and it's
that's how your career in medicine started, kind of on a whim with a buddy in a classroom. Well, how did you then pick the discipline that you're in? What interested you, to be intensive care? Obviously, is
well. I went to University of South Dakota. I only applied to one medical school.
Okay,
got in there and I did my residency. My wife's from Sioux Falls. She grew up in Sioux Falls, went to Washington, and so when we were there, I drove back and forth every day to Vermilion, and because at the time, we had one child starting medical school. I'd been married 10 years. I was 30 when I started medical school. And so I went to medical school, and I was one of those people that liked everything I did. I was in the fire department here. I was in a volunteer fire department, and I thought, well, I want to do trauma surgery or something like that. But it was one of those things I just liked everything that I did. I think everything, and especially medical schools, attending dependent, who you're with. You can think you want to do something, but if you're with somebody who's awful, you get soured on it. And I just happened to have really cool people that taught me, and then so I thought, well, I'll do internal medicine because one of the things I say this tongue in cheek, but one of the things I didn't want to do is go to medical school and not know how to take care of sick people.
Yeah.
So, and I figured internal medicine. I'm like, Kids are awesome. The parents are crazy. I don't want to do peds. I love delivering babies.
Yeah.
They were cool. But the ones I got to deliver in medical school all came between 1 and 3 in the morning. And I said, I'm probably not going to work. Not very family friendly, although I loved it. So I did internal medicine. Family practice I loved. I almost did family practice. I really liked emergency medicine, just maybe the fire department person in me. But I always figured, what am I going to do in 10 or 15 years if I'm burnt out and I'm boarded in ER. But internal medicine, I could do a lot of different things. And so one of my idols and mentors, who was subsequently passed away, Dr. Ed Zawada, talked me into going to internal medicine. He was the chairman of the internal medicine department of the School of Medicine at the time. And so I did internal medicine. And then internal medicine is one of those things you can either be an internist or you can subspecialize. So all the subspecialties like cardiology, pulmonary, rheumatology, all those. And you just pick the one, I think, that you like the chronic crud, so to speak. Do you want to deal with diabetes? Do you want endocrine? Do you want to deal with people short of breath? You do pulmonary, And to me, nephrology was kidney specialist was one of the ones where you had to be a good, not only primary care provider, but a good specialist because you take care of chronic dialysis patients. So I did a fellowship in Richmond, Virginia for 2 years in nephrology. And then I came back to Avera, and I always liked nephrology because they do a lot in the ICU. I love the ICU.
Yeah.
And so when I was back, they were starting a program at Avera called the electronic or EICU. And so I got involved in that, and then they sent me to do a critical care fellowship at Nebraska Medical Center. So I did that for a year. And then I was always involved in the medical school. I'm a professor. I was chair of critical care department at School of Medicine. I've always loved critical care. I loved ICU. I loved nephrology too. I hated clinic for the most part, but the nurse who took care of me was awesome. So I happened to come out here to Rapid for Rapid City. At the time had the EICU, and I was the director. So I would come out and visit, and I got to know people out here. And so people like Justin Green and Mick Gibbs, who was the president of the hospital at the time, they started haranguing me. And then a friend of mine from Sioux Falls came out here, and he said, "This is pretty cool." So my kids were they made me I said they godfathered me, and they made me an offer I couldn't refuse. And so I said, well, my daughter's a senior in high school. I can't move. So I drove back and forth for a while, and that turned into a couple more years because of COVID.
Yeah.
But anyway, I ended up coming back here to work in 2015 full-time in the ICU.
So if that friend of yours in school had turned to you and said, "Hey, man, you want to take the bar exam with me?" Would you have said sure?
No.
I just am wondering the path that you got put on. If it could have been literally anything that you kind of had interest in, if you would have ended up being somebody else, maybe.
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah. You strike me as the type of person who always has to be doing something. Is that fair?
That would be spot on.
Well, what's a day like in the ICU for you? I mean, what is so attractive about it?
Well, and I'm biased, of course, but I think ICU is one of those, and it's a subspecialty of internal medicine. I mean, to get to critical care, you can go several routes. You can go surgery, and then they have a year-long fellowship, or you can do anesthesia. We have few people that have done emergency medicine and then do a fellowship. Or in medicine, you can do pulmonary, nephrology, ID, cardiology. There's a few of them. Then you only have to do a year of critical care and fellowship. Or you can do a 2-year critical care fellowship, like a friend of mine works with me at Monument. He did a 2-year fellowship at Mayo. So, I mean, there's different routes, but to get to critical care, I think, to me, I go to work and I take care of the sickest, most expensive people in the hospital. And I can't, my mother-in-law, who recently just passed away at age 93, said, "When are you going to retire?" And I said, I honestly love what I do, and why should I retire? I work 13 days a month. I get to go and I sit with people and I talk to people. I could tell you, we could write books about stories. I tell people all the time, you're not guaranteed the next 15 seconds. Yeah. And I've sat with so many people, and that's what I love about my job. I like this. This is killing me. I'm just talking about myself, but I'd rather sit and talk to you about where you're from and what you're. But people, I talk to them all the time. Well, I had breakfast with Mark this morning. I think Mark dropped dead from a heart attack at work. Mark had a stroke, or somebody got hit by a car. I mean, it's just like you don't expect. And it's and people don't care how much money they have, what lot in life they come from. If they're septic on a ventilator, on multiple pressors, and they just want to get better.
Yeah.
And I truly brag. I'm the chair of critical care at Monument, and I'd brag about people. I say this unabashedly. I call us the top tier operators of the hospital. And if you know anything about military, top-tier operators, they're like the Delta Force, the SEAL Team 6. I said when the bus is going sideways, they're calling the ICU. Yeah. There are great people that do their job, their specific areas, whether it's orthopedics, cardiac, whatever. But when the person is crashing, they're calling the ICU for help. And that's... that's what amazes me. My son asked me, my middle son, who will graduate from medical school this year, said, "When are you going to know when it's time to retire?" And I said, if I ever walk into work and the hair on the back of my neck doesn't stand up. And I'm, truly
Right.
that I might not know something, or then I'll know it's time to probably, do something else.
You see people on the worst days of their lives
Yes.
at some point. How do you mentally? How do you deal with that when you go home at night? That's got to be hard. I mean, I've seen a little bit of that with you right here. That it seems to be.
It is very difficult. COVID almost killed me, not because of COVID,
Right.
but because of just the volume of people that were sick and the way people passed away. But I always think probably the biggest part of me is I'm a Christian first,
Sure.
so I believe in God, and I talk to my wife all the time. I don't know how people get through some things without saying I would go, I believe that God's in control of everything. I believe that he knows the beginning from the end, and there's no surprises with him.
Right.
I don't know how people who don't have that belief that there's a purpose for everything, no matter what, no matter small, I don't know how they survive, honestly.
But you have a good family dynamic too, though.
My family's awesome.
Yeah, that must really help you out
Yeah.
when it comes to this as well.
I'm the low-hanging fruit in the family.
Well, how many kids do you have, Doctor?
Well, my wife says she has 4.
Okay.
I have 3.
Yep. I totally understand.
Yeah. My oldest son, John, he's awesome. He's a master's in education. He's a high school teacher in Olathe, Kansas, and football, wrestling coach.
Sure.
Married to his wife, Sage, and he's great. Probably still one of the hardest working people I've ever met in my life.
Wow.
Luke, my middle son, like I said, he will graduate from medical school this year in May and be a foot surgeon. He loves it. And then Abby, my youngest, she's the princess who lives in Aberdeen, Scotland, working on her second year PhD in English literature, and so.
Now, your son that's going to be a doctor, would it be fun for you to work with him in the same hospital? Would that be something you'd enjoy doing? Or
I just always tell him to do good so he can pick up my nursing home.
That's the reason why we have kids, to have them take care of us when we get
Tax
older.
write-offs.
Now, I know a couple of big passions of yours, I think, and just having the conversation that we've had about, what it's like to work in an ICU. You do need other outlets, I think, in order to take your mind off some of these things, right? To kind of help you deal with it a little bit more. And photography and painting are two ways that you do this as well. How does that work in your life? I mean, does that help you deal with what you deal with? And then where did that passion come from? You have too many.
Yeah.
There's just
you sound like my wife. So now I don't know. I've always been my mom played piano, and so I grew up loving music. And I've grown up. I played guitar for a long time, 50 years. Been in multiple bands and stuff. And then in high school, I had a great teacher named Mr. Six, Alan Six, who was the photography teacher in high school, and he was a great photographer himself. He's had so many covers of Field and Stream and all kinds of stuff. But he got me interested in photography, and I was always a landscape, black and white, Ansel Adams, disciple, and so I did that for years. I've always been a doodler. I doodle all the time. I mean, it drives my wife. I always have my. Drives her crazy because I
carry around
I'm always drawing and doodling.
Good Lord!
And so, and she's gotten to learn over the years that if we're sitting having dinner, I'm paying attention to her. I just might be drawing.
Those are just doodles.
Yeah. So I've just always watercolor and oil painted, and so that's.
I just got a glimpse of when you open that a little bit. Those look like prints that you have in there that you've done, and those are just what you've loosely sketched.
So no,
oh my goodness!
I just doodle, and that's why I say I'm a doodler, and then I try and write a poem for every painting I do. So that's what
your brain is fascinating me. It's completely. It just seems like it never takes a second to shut off.
No, it doesn't.
How does it? Do you? What type of paintings do you do then specifically?
What do you mean? I painted watercolor,
What type
and
of
oil.
Do you do
Landscapes.
wildlife, landscape? That's
Yeah.
kind of what you're doing. Okay.
I could show you.
Yes,
but
please.
At some point.
You have some photos that you brought in, and for those people that don't know, we also film this podcast. So
Do you want me to get them?
Yeah, please. Well, I'm kind of explaining here, if you wouldn't mind. You can watch these podcasts on the Monuments YouTube channel as well, and like I say, if you're just listening to this,
I wouldn't have done that. No, I'm just kidding.
yeah, Doctor was a little concerned that there were 3 cameras on him here in the studio.
Oh,
good heavens. Just set it right up in front of the microphone right there because we can catch it on this camera.
So my sister-in-law recently passed away from
Okay.
Parkinson's, and she loved pink roses.
So this, what you're looking at in here is pink roses on kind of it's kind of an earthy green and brown background a little bit on a table. Some of them have fallen onto the table. That's a beautiful painting. Absolutely.
And then one of the things I've always was taught in photography to think in series. So I have a series of pink roses paintings. Then I do from Wyoming. My dad was a fanatical fly fisherman, so I've done paintings of
Of trout.
Rainbow
trout.
Then I have brown trout and brook trout and
those are, and that's all oil painting?
those both oil paintings.
Both oil?
Any photography. I have a photography website, but
What is your website?
KovaleskyPhoto.com.
KovaleskyPhoto.com. KOVALESKI.
And I mean to take some pictures of paintings, but I just like I said, I have piles of them on the floor.
Right.
And my wife,
So is that what your house looks like? Is just a bunch of these kind of leaned up against walls and such? And
a lot, yeah. So if you go down to my studio, I've got piles of watercolor paintings, and
now, do you sell any of these?
just somebody's silly enough to buy them.
Somebody's like, this is great. I want to. Oh my.
So this is one I recently did.
Do that same thing, yeah, up to that camera, and they'll be able to see it perfectly. What? Okay, now for those listening to the podcast right now, you have a Native American on a white horse, like through dust, clouds of dust. What's the story behind this one? Go ahead and get back on the microphone with that, Doctor, and tell me.
I've always, like I said, I think in series. So I'm doing a series. I've done a Mountain Man series. And so I'm doing a Western type series. There's another one with a cowboy on a horse. And this one, I was just sitting there one day and I called it like Echoes of Triumph. I've done a lot of, so when I start on a project, I do a lot of research. So I bought a lot of books, watched a lot of documentaries. And so I try and learn. I'm working on a book at some point. I'd like to do one called The Pride of the Dakotas and I read about all the 9 different reservations in South Dakota and where they all came from and the languages they speak. I took Lakota lessons for a while. It is very hard to learn.
Oh, I'm sure.
It's very hard. So then COVID hit and then I just never picked it back up. So this is just a part of that series of Western art. And
these are amazing, Doctor. They are really, really good. So, and that oil on there, I don't know a lot about art. I'm kind of the type of person that I like it when I see it, sort of a deal, right?
Well, that's art.
It is.
Some things, people, I say, how do you separate being a doctor and then a painter? And then I said, you don't. I mean, that's all of us. Is everything that we do makes up who we are.
Right.
And I don't, art is one of those things I paint for me. Mm-hmm. I don't paint for you. I don't paint for my wife. I paint for me. And if I like it, that's all that really matters. And if you like it, cool. If you don't like it, cool. Because art is one of those things, the gut reactions that you go, oh, man, that's awesome. And I might walk up to and go, oh, man, that's just a banana on a board with a piece of duct tape. You know what I mean?
Which sold for $6 million.
So I mean, art is
totally subjective, of course. But these are, just the way that brightness from that oil is what I really like on these photos or on these paintings. Do you ever paint at all? What you do for a living? Do you ever get into?
I'm going to start actually. So the person, and that's another tangent to go down about what it takes to become an expert at something.
Yeah.
I used to talk about that. But I think people should have mentors whether they're in medicine or art or broadcasting or whatever. You should, if you want to get better, you need somebody to help you. And the person my mentor over the last several years have been a person named Mark Carter, Carder. Mark, he lives in Austin, Texas. He's painted portraits he painted George Bush's second portrait that hangs in the White House. I mean, he's fanatical, fantastic painter. So I'm going down there for a week. Next week, basically 7 hours a day with one-on-one with him to do portrait stuff. And I wanted to do the portraits are very hard. It's probably the hardest thing just because, you can paint a portrait, people who don't know you might look at it and go, people who know you and go, man, that Mark, well, his forehead looks funny. Or, or it's like drawing a horse. I mean, it's very easy to go from horse to donkey, if you don't get the ears right, but I would like to do some portraits of medical workers and not just physicians. I personally think the hospital would shut down just as fast as if all the housekeepers quit than if all the physicians walked out.
Absolutely.
But it's a team effort. But do some still lifes and some portraits of a medical series. Yeah. So that's what we're going to work on in Austin next week.
Do any of these?
Even though I hate to fly.
Do you have any of these that hang anywhere outside of your home? Do you have any that are in the hospital? Do you hang them in your office at least?
No.
Oh, wow.
Well,
how are we supposed to appreciate these, doctor, if you don't bring them out of the pillowcases and let us see them?
I don't know.
You've got to let some people see this stuff. This is amazing. Again, I appreciate the fact that you come out honestly and say you do it for you. This is why you do. And I think some of the best artists that have ever lived, that's why they did it. They did it for them, and these people happen to love it. My name is Van Gogh. Fantastic, right?
And most artists, they don't get, very few get popular or actually make money at it until after they pass away.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
If you're doing art to make money, you're doing it the wrong thing.
100%. Is there something in your profession in the ICU that a lot of people might find surprising? Do you have anything that people genuinely like to ask you about, or questions you get quite a bit like that? Or is there anything that you were like, I wish more people knew this about ICU?
I truly work with some of the smartest, best people in the hospital. And I go to work every day and I don't belong here, and I'm just like, and it's an honor for me to be able to sit with people and talk to them. And like we said, you're not guaranteed the next 15 seconds. And I think one of the things, America is the greatest country in the history of civilization, still in my opinion. But one of the things we don't do well is die. And it's hard, for people to talk about. It's hard for doctors to admit, because you're kind of admitting failure at some point. But I always talk to people that it's kind of like we were talking beginning of this podcast, that great philosopher Thanos from Infinity Wars. You can dread it, run from it, but destiny comes for you all the same.
Yeah.
And I talk to people and I see it. Unfortunately, there are, like say it a different way, but there are good ways to die and there are bad ways to die. And we tend to, maybe it's just the will to live. I went through it with my dad, who passed away from lung cancer before I went to medical school. He died in 1993, a month before my oldest son was born. But he was on, got put on a ventilator. And I talked to people that, for lack of better terminology, it's a lot easier to not start something than it is to start it and have to shut it off, as I've learned. But I think we're the people in the ICU. I was in the ICU for a while, and it's the best. They're the best people in the hospital.
Well, that's a huge compliment for sure. Yeah. Well, doctor, if I had to, let me put you slightly on the spot here. If I had to have you describe your life and what you do in one photograph.
In one photograph.
What would that photograph look like? Or painting. You can do either one.
Well, hopefully. Sorry about that.
I didn't mean to put you too much on the spot, but
hopefully that when I'm done, that Jesus is sitting there waiting for me and says, "Good job, well done."
Well, that's all you can ask for. That's all you can ask for sure.
Sorry.
No. That was, like I said, I knew I was going to put you on the spot there a little bit, but after seeing your art, I didn't get to see any of your photography, which now I'm definitely going to be. Can you give the website one more time so we can see it?
Yeah, KovaleskyPhoto.com.
Kovaleski, KOVALESKI.com. Photo, KovaleskyPhoto.com. Cool. Check it out, you guys. And, thank you. Perfect. Well, now, okay, you gave me a business card without a photo or a painting on it.
Yes.
We're going to work on that when we're done here, but perfect. Dr. David Kovaleski, thank you very much for coming in and doing this. And anytime you want to talk about what you do or this art, let's do it. I'd love to have you back, okay?
Sure.
Thank you very much, Doctor. I appreciate it.